So Jess, I understand that with real estate, database management is usually something that teams often drop, particularly when there's a bit of an uptick in the market, things start getting exciting. But following a consistent process of client connection throughout the entire year sounds like a very important foundation to have in your business. So tell us a little bit about the client connections process that you've developed and how it's worked with some of your clients.
Yeah, I think client connections is effectively what that looks like. It's a system of how we manage our database across a 12-month period. So from a simplistic point of view, if you think about if I'm a homeowner and I live in your suburb, what is the experience going to look like for me in the next 12 months when I'm not thinking of selling my home? That's how I explain it to people. And we had a recent example of this not too far from where we are here today, over in Ray White Mill Park, and we started working with a business there. And this is very typical. And if you're leader watching this right now, you go and do a little test on your own business. Look at what you've written, in the past 12 months in commission, and then go to look at your database, all the contacts you have in your CRM system, and then go to realestate.com and look at all the listings that have come to market in the past month, and then cross-reference that against the contacts in your database and times it by 12. What we typically find is a business at a minimum who's got a lot of contacts in their database is leaking the same amount of commission they're writing from lost opportunities. And that's where we start to get them to understand the pain points.
Yeah, that's ouch. I can imagine that would really hurt. Even when you think you're doing well, you're not doing that well, and you can always do better. So tell us a little bit about your client connection process. I understand that it sort of happens on sort of 3 layers or 3 levels.
Well, the first part, again, is we spoke about this in one of our previous videos, is a business that understanding the value of a database effectively first. So we just talked about, firstly, the first thing I'll look at is let's look at the leakage, let's look at the pain points. This example I gave earlier was that there was in the vicinity of $2 to $3 million in leakage, which is quite substantial. So the first thing we do is understand the value of it first. Then we want to look at what is the capacity of the communication plan going to look like? So most businesses I look at will either be at 3 or 4 different levels of their ability to manage and keep in touch with their database. So we generally like it to businesses to start small and work themselves up. That's the second part. The third piece is then effectively the work with the team, how we hold them accountable to getting on the phones and how we're then going to communicate to that database over a 12-month period. And we have a couple of steps that we look at inside the process of making sure we can analyse that to make sure it's actually working.
And so give us an example. Is there someone that you've worked with recently that has done this well and has had a good result from this?
We've had many examples, and as the business I mentioned out in Mill Park recently, we looked at their leakage first. So we're in the actually early stages of them, the implementation part of the program. Got another great client up in New South Wales, Dan Schubert from JKL Property, who has really owned this part of his business. And the great thing that he does as a leader is he communicates to his team every week at the same time, and he gives them real-time data on the performance of their database. So what that looks like is, what's the percentage of contact every agent's had in the previous 90 days? What's the lost opportunities we've had inside our database? But also, of the listings with the businesses won, where have they originated from? And he talks about that the program we taught his business is what percentage of listings that his team's listing are coming from the client connection system that we teach.
That's so awesome. So that's so motivating across so many levels. How do the staff feel about these processes when you're implementing something like this? Is it received welcomingly?
It is. And I always talk about 2 parts of this to leaders. And back when I was running my business day to day, one thing I was really proud of is that we never ever lost one of our staff to a competitor. And we knew it was as a result of a system like this, because we knew our team couldn't get it anywhere else. And these couple of examples I've just given you, these other clients we're working with, same thing's happening. It's because they've got a system to nurture the relationship. And the one thing that I'll say around the client connections process, it's the first part of a business that's stopped. When they get busy, they stop prospecting, they stop managing the longer term part of their business. And the businesses who get this right, I always say from a high level perspective, we need to be someone's real estate agent before they need a real estate agent. And this is effectively what this client connections process is all about.
What does it look like from a long-term pipeline of listings perspective? I mean, I can imagine it's creating these consistent drip through of leads popping out as clients, just like you've talked about. But what sort of percentage increase is happening when you've got that consistency of touch points?
Well, I think a different business will have different measurements of touch points of this. And I don't know, for example, up in New South Wales, I mean, they're probably now looking at around 50% of their overall listings are coming from the client connection model, and they're growing year on year. So when you think about how many listings your business is listing, look back on the previous 12 months, look at where your listings are coming from. It's an exercise I'll ask a leader when I first go into a business. Let's look at your last 12 months listings, and very quickly I can find out how reactive their business is. And then you can actually talk to your team about that and think about if your business or your team came into work on the 1st of January every year and they knew what percentage of listings were going to come from the database, they're going to come to work pretty motivated to do the work you want them to do. When you've got real-time data in terms of the performance of listings coming from their database.
Absolutely. It sounds extremely empowering as a staff member to have that level of control over your own future. And where does this fit into the bigger picture of your training system? Is this one of the first things that you implement with people, or it comes a little bit later down the track?
This lives in our 8 drivers approach. So when we have a business owner comes to us, we have the core, I guess the base fundamental level we call 8 drivers. We do an assessment upon the business in 8 particular areas, with client connections being one of those. And then we look at, it just leads on from there, from client connections into pipeline management, into listings, into sales, after sales, team accountability. But this part is a critical one. And when you think about it like this, so many people come to us and they want the perfect script for a listing presentation. And I always say to business leaders that we can give you some scripts, but that might change a moment, but it's not going to change the career of your agents. If we get the client connections piece right and we instill a communication rhythm across the next 12 months that everyone in your team understands, that's where your business is going to come from longer term. And it's a longer term strategy for consistency.